thank the organizers, all the Patos, the Joachims, and everybody I know there for the kind invitation. Although it's Friday morning for me, I'm really happy to join in. It's a real pleasure and a real honor. Um, in fact, I will present something maybe a little bit strange, artificial intelligence in reproductive medicine. Although I think that in many fields of medicine, artificial intelligence is coming in and it will become part of our daily practice. And in reproductive medicine, in many centers, it's already sneaking in and becoming part of our daily practice. I don't have a conflict of interests for the contents of this presentation. And as you can see, I don't have any interest in a conflict neither. Although I have to be honest that over all the years, as Pato told, yeah, I do have a conflict of interest because I got a lot of good colleagues becoming good friends. And to be honest, I fell in love with your country. So it's a major conflict of interest, I would say. Now, let's start. What is artificial intelligence? Well, basically, in fact, already today, you yourself probably are in contact with artificial intelligence all the time. If you have an iPhone in your hand now, you can ask Siri to start up an app. This is a low-level artificial intelligence, but it is a system that performs a task. You can go another level, a higher level, which is that you train a certain algorithm in the software to recognize things. And this is also in the newer iPhones effect by face recognition, for example. And you can also go for the deepest level, which is called the deep learning, so self-learning algorithms. And there, I think one of the examples I use a lot is DeepL. For those who don't know DeepL, DeepL is a sort of Google Translate, but really at a much higher level. If you put in a Spanish text and I say, translate it to Dutch. If it's a poem, it will translate in, let's say, Dutch poem form. If it's a rock song, it will become a rock song. It really understands the context. Okay, let's go to IVF, reproductive medicine. So you can compare a little bit the levels. The simple artificial intelligence would mean that you monitor some procedure, that software is looking over your shoulder to see what you're doing, if you're doing it correct way. The next level, machine learning, that there is a sort of training algorithm involved, is an embryo grading. So a machine can tell you, this is a good embryo, this is a bad embryo. So this is an embryo that probably has a higher chance to implant. And if you go to the deep learning level, then typical example that already are existing and are being used now are the predictive models to tell prediction to patients, but also give some predictive models for the centers and the doctors, clinicians themselves. I don't have to explain in vitro fertilization, I think, but anyhow, in vitro fertilization is a sequence of different steps. And to be honest, at each step, there is interaction with the human factor. And the human factor is, of course, a factor that can make mistakes, errors all the time. And it can already be done during the stimulation phase, but certainly error prone is everything that happens in the lab, where the right sperm has to come together with the right oocytes, and then eventually the right embryo should go into the right patient. If we go a little bit through that sequence and have a look to what is already present nowadays, we can start with the monitoring phase, where many of you have already these systems in place where, for example, you can have an automated measurement of follicles. You see it below there on the left. The truth is, of course, that these systems are at this phase still very primitive. They do work, but they don't have the learning algorithm already installed, which means that you still have to tell the machine, no, this is not a follicle, this is a bowel. But the truth is that if these manufacturers of these systems would invest more in software, that probably in a couple of years we will have a completed automated system that will be making the right decisions just leaving out what is bowel, what is other structures, and really focus only on follicles, and then maybe make also decision towards the monitoring and the planning of the patients and the further hormonal stimulation. Because indeed, apart from the scan, you also need hormonal assessment. And nowadays, most of us will do what you see on the left. This is my colleague Christophe Bloquel, who is looking to the screen of a patient and is looking to the estradiol rise. And then he makes in his mind an association with the scans, and then he makes a decision on what to do. On the other hand, you see that for spontaneous conceptions, we are already a little bit further on, because there are systems, apps on, for example, smartphones that combine ovulation test on urine with a predictive model in the app. And that's maybe a little bit strange, because many of these apps are already being used on a broad basis. But as you can see, this is an example of few of them. But if you go on the right side, you see Ovia, and you see there is a privacy policy. You can share it, but anyhow, you cannot share things anonymously. You have to register. And then if you go down, the tricky things are there, because in the last line, you see insurer and your own employer can in fact monitor you if you also subscribe to some wellness programs that they will provide to you. In other words, your employer may know that you try to get pregnant, which of course is tricky, because maybe he doesn't like that and he will fire you. So there are a little bit things in artificial intelligence that are really awkward and that make that people are a little bit afraid of it. Now let's go back to IVF. So the crucial step, of course, is what happens in the lab: fertilization, embryo culture, selection of the right embryo, transfer of the right embryo. And already there are many examples of problems in the lab where people mix up things. Either the wrong sperm is used with the wrong oocytes, but also there are tricky things like the guy on the right. He became father, but his wife apparently provided semen for IVF, but the semen was from her lover boy and not from him. So it's not only errors in the lab that can happen, but there are also mistakes or intended mistakes on the side of the patient sometimes. So we take always pictures of patients and we try to make sure that we get the right sperm, because we also had some cases in the past where suddenly another husband showed up than the first one that we have ever seen. And how does it work? Well, in the perfect world, of course, everything is well labeled. On the left, you see a straw of sperm with the barcode in it. But still, many of us are still writing down things, making mistakes when writing down things, or making mistakes when we enter things. And in the end, the quality insurance that right sperm is used, right embryos put back, is because we have a sort of witness system. And a witness system where a colleague is looking over the shoulder, and one person is doing a manipulation or a selection, and the other one is checking, is this truly the sperm of Mr. X? Are these oocytes the oocytes of Mrs. X? And are you mixing both together in the right way? And then you sign off either on a sheet or on a computer. And this is the way it works, or should work. Of course, it means a lot of labor intensivity, a lot of cost too, labor costs, salary costs. And also after a while, people, they say, this is a good colleague, she will do right, and mistakes may happen. And this can happen at every level. So the husband and the wife comes at the reception, they see a doctor maybe, then they go for sperm collection, at least the husband. In the meantime, the wife goes for the oocyte collection, in the lab the sperm is prepared, etc., etc. And already now, for example, we in Brussels have a system in place where there is a witness by a computer system, by artificial intelligence at each step. And the way it works is that at the reception, in fact, there is an identification of both husband and wife. And all the materials that are being used throughout the whole process are labeled. You see it on the left with that small square. It's a radio frequency identification. And in fact, you start with either a batch that the patient has to give when they come for treatment, or you can even use the fingerprint of the patient to match whether indeed you use the correct materials containers, test tubes, etc. for this couple. And then every time you do something in the lab, you work on a sort of plate where a detection system is built in, and the artificial intelligence software will tell you that there is no match. So there is a wrong match. You used the wrong oocyte or wrong sperm, and there will be a stop sign and an alarm going. You can also see that the system tracks down things that are left in the work area. So maybe you left sperm sample from a previous patient. All these things, they are logged. It's a beautiful system. And now and then you get an alarm that there is indeed a human error. But this system will really prevent it. It's a huge investment, but it's a real very good system. And the proof of that is that in Brussels and in Belgium, we have quite a large Orthodox Jewish community in Antwerp, in Amberes. And rabbis, normally, when a patient of the Chassidim community comes for treatment, the rabbi wants to follow the sperm, wants to follow the oocyte. When they go into the incubator has to be sealed, and only you can take out the embryos or the oocytes the next day if, again, rabbi or a representative is there, breaks the seals, and opens the incubator for you. This is not really compatible with our standards of quality in our hospital, and so we invited them to check the witness system, the artificial intelligence system, and in fact, to our surprise, they agreed with it because for them it's the eyes of the rabbi. They can look into the logs at every moment. Now it's in fact on a report, but in the near future probably they can do it online as long as the patient gives, of course. If the patient agrees that they can have a look to their files all the time when they want what's happening. And so it means that really the system works, and if the rabbi say it's okay, it should be okay, I think. Now, also further in the process, there are other types of artificial intelligence systems that are already in place. For example, here on the left, you see an oocyte, and you see a lot of annotations of parameters, thickness of the zona, granularity of the oocyte, size of the polar body, size of the oocyte, and you can learn the system which oocyte will give rise to a pregnancy or will give rise to, for example, a nice embryo on day 5, a blastocyst. And eventually the system will learn, and by checking for these parameters will give a prediction. And for example, here is a patient, Maria Du, and she has 10 mature oocytes, and the system, here is an example of a system, tells her that in fact there is a little bit more than 50% chance that she will have 4 to 7 blastocysts on the day 5. And it also implies that the chance to give birth to a baby will be something like 42.3%. And of course, the more data you enter into the system for your setting, the more accurate this prediction will be. And so here is a company that is selling these type of reports to centers and to patients. And yeah, probably this is also happening also already in Chile. We perform about 300 social freezing cycles a year now in Brussels, which means that women who gets, let's say, towards 35 or over 35 and still have not the right partner or still have a career that doesn't allow them to have children, they bank their oocytes, and it's a very efficient way to stop the biological clock. It's maybe a debatable way, but anyhow, they buy or they go for a sort of reproductive insurance. And for every insurance, if you have an insurance, a fire insurance, you assume that you have 100% coverage. Of course, with oocyte banking, it's not true. And nowadays, what we use to counsel the patient is that we know that depending to the age of the patient, you need a certain number of oocytes to have a probability, a certain probability to have a baby frozen in the egg bank. If you look to, for example, the States, you see all the costs involved, and up to the storage, you go over $15,000. If you then even use the oocytes later on, you go over $20,000. So basically, it's quite important for a patient if she spends the money on this, that she has a good prediction. And again, there, systems like the one I showed you may give them a better prediction on how many oocytes should be frozen, or what is the chance and the coverage of the insurance, if you like, with the number they have already frozen. But also on the level of sperm, artificial intelligence is being introduced. For many years, we have the computer-assisted semen analyzers. The problem is, again, they are not so reliable at the moment. They measure immotile cells as being immotile sperm cells, while they are not sperm cells, and things like that. And again, there is probably a lot of room to teach these systems, to feed them data, and to make it more accurate. And for example, we in Brussels, we will now collaborate with a company, it's a Belgian company, it's called RoboVision, and they have a turnover of doubling of their staff every year. They are now worldwide already spreading, and they are more than 200 people just designing the learning modules for this type of systems. On the right side, you see, for example, another example that is being introduced, which is the DNA fragmentation testing, looking to the genetic content of sperm, which may be a better parameter to predict fertility than just counting sperm. But nowadays, these tests, they are not so reliable. There's also a human factor involved. And again, artificial intelligence feeding a lot of data, telling to the system afterwards, this was compatible with an IVF pregnancy or with a spontaneous pregnancy, will of course make that you learn the system and that you get to a system that is really very, very accurate in predicting something, which is not the case at the moment. And then the best example that many of you probably already know of or have heard of is the system where by time-lapse, by taking pictures of your embryos in a closed incubator, you make a sort of movie, if you like, that is being analyzed again by software. And eventually, the system will give you a report telling for each embryo what is the grading, what was the speed of development, and then eventually telling you this is the best embryo that gives the highest chance to get to a live birth. When these systems were introduced more than 10 years ago, in fact, the first companies, they tried already to put in an algorithm that would give a prediction. The only problem was that there are so many other parameters interfering with the system and with the developmental rate of the embryos that the slightest factor that you change oxygen tension, another culture media, that the whole algorithm was lost. But now, of course, there is more deep learning possibilities. And again, by feeding in your own setting with your own medium and your own oxygen level, the system all the time, probably one day it will become more reliable and better than it is now. It's already been for a while on the market, all these systems with deep learning. And on the left, you see a system that claims that it's doing better than 5 embryologists. And you see, indeed, the embryologist, blue should all be blue and yellow should all be yellow. The outer ring is the system, and it's not black and white, it's yellow and blue, if you like. Of course, this is a study that assumes that the system is the golden standard. Maybe the majority vote of the 5 embryologists is the exact standard. We don't know. On the other hand, the curve, the rock curve that you see, shows you another study where in fact they compared such systems with what the human, the embryologist, would predict as being the best embryo. And you see that the curves are not so well to start with, but in fact, there is no difference between the embryologist and the neural network that has a learning system built in. But again, over time, it will come. And already now, in fact, maybe this system will save you labor cost because embryologists are quite expensive people. If they are ill or they are on pregnancy leave, the system keeps on working, of course. So there may be other reasons why you indeed want to introduce the system in your lab. Now, the truth is that a lot of my colleagues that I know that have the system in place, we do have 3 of these systems, and we only use them for research because they can do standardized research, in fact. But one of the main reasons is on this slide. Nowadays, it's being promoted also, watch your embryos during their development. So you can log in on the internet and have a look in the incubator for your own embryos. And be honest, it's very nice if you put your baby on Instagram to put also the videotape of the development of the embryo that became your baby. And you see, it's even in the layman press, it's highly promoted. So it's quite commercial and marketing wise, a very nice application of artificial intelligence, I would say. Now, there is a company, Kristin Hickman is an embryologist working for this UK company involved in artificial intelligence in our field. And they did a little survey among clinicians asking, would your patient be interested to have online access to check and watch what the embryos are doing in the incubator? And you see that more than half of the clinicians says, yes, I'm sure my patients would be interested. But again, you also see that a little bit less than half, they say, look, whatever the patient wants, I would like to give access. And this is, of course, for reasons of you give the patient access, they can videotape it. The slightest thing that go wrong can be used against you, and things can go wrong in the lab, of course. So there is, again, some fear for artificial intelligence from clinicians, I think, here too. Another nice example, although it's not yet on the market as far as I know, is storage. Storage of embryos, storage of sperm. The way it works is that somebody has to put straws in the tank in the right position with the right labeling. At a certain point, the embryos are used. Somebody has to get them out, has to get out the right embryos. Sometimes, there is a manipulation problem, and on the bottom of the tank, some straws with embryos are left there. On top of it, in most countries, and I'm sure in Chile too, you have, for the regulatory body, you have to make every year a sort of report on how many sperm was used, how many sperm is still in your tanks, etc. It's a huge effort to do all this without mistakes. And on the right, you see a system. In fact, a system with a sort of low-level artificial intelligence built in, if you like, that in fact does the job. It will put in a certain position in the tank embryos, and you see on the label on the right, in this case, there are 2 embryos that should be taken out of the system to get an embryo transfer in a certain patient. The system, you take the name of the patient and you tell them, look, I need 2 embryos, and the system will take them out and make them, make also the report ready. We'll also make the count, etc., etc. You can think, this is easy, but it's not easy because this is some technique that should work, mechanical things that should work at -92, which is not so easy, apparently. And again, this is just a simple application, but probably very important because it's a process where mistakes can be made and where we spend a lot of time, in fact, unnecessary probably. And then eventually, of course, what counts is also the success rate, the live birth rate. And there are nowadays already a lot of so-called add-ons, so additional techniques that we use in order to improve the success rate. And one of the most popular ones is, of course, the genetic testing of embryos, so the aneuploidy screening. And aneuploidy screening means that you take some cells from a day 5 embryo, and then you put them in sort of genetic system, and there are different systems, microarrays, and even next generation sequencing. But then somebody has to analyze the results that come out, the data, and tell them to the clinician, this is the right embryo, this is not a good embryo, it's an aneuploidy, it will not implant or give rise to miscarriages. And here you see already application of artificial intelligence for pre-implantation genetic testing. The bars, clinic A, clinic B, are exactly the same. The green ones are euploid embryos. The blue ones are aneuploids, but you see that the dark bars are always better than the light bars, and the light bars are the geneticists doing the analysis, and the dark bars, the better results, are the results analyzed by a system, in fact, that has an algorithm built in. And in fact, the idea is that you have the raw data out of your genetic test by internet, you send them to that service and you pay, of course, and you get a report by the artificial intelligence system back, and you don't need, in fact, the geneticist anymore. It can be even go further. So here you see, for example, the application of artificial intelligence to do a donor matching for sperm or for oocytes. And you can see that there is biometry. You can do phenotype matching, blue eyes, brown eyes, but you can even do matching for carriership. Patients now are being promoted to go for carriership screening for 200 mutations or potential mutations or even more, depending on what you want to pay. But this system, they try to promote that on top of, for example, just phenotype matching, you also will check carriership screening to make sure that risk for certain genetic diseases will be reduced. Of course, the truth at this moment, this is more a commercial tool to attract patients than probably it's really worthwhile, because carriership screening nowadays is still in its infancy, of course. And then you go to the bigger systems, the deep learning systems, where you need to compile data from different clinics to put them together in a system, and they use blockchain architectures for that. And here, for example, you see a system where both patients can make use of, but also clinicians. So in fact, it's again a sort of report that tries to tell to patients based on their age, based on their BMI, based on other factors, do they smoke, how many cigarettes, etc., can tell them this is probably your success rate. And if you then also have it for all these centers, you can also tell the patient, if you go to Clinica Alemana, it will be that success rate probably. You see at every level, they promote it for different reasons to give your patients the correct counseling. Correct counseling means that you tell your patients, for example, if you would do 2 IVF cycles, you have a chance of 90% to have a baby. Well, the retention of your patient will improve, they tell you. It means that after 1 cycle not being pregnant, the patient will not go to another center because she knew that it was 2 cycles she needed. She will stay for at least 2 cycles, etc. But also, for example, in the United States, there are quite a lot of IVF programs that try to sell a guarantee, a warranty to the patients. For example, if you pay us this sum of money, we guarantee you with 90% that you will have a baby, otherwise it's money back. But if you want to do that, and even you want to make a profit, a sort of marginal benefit on what you do, this system will also, based on your own data, make a prediction what this type of insurance should cost, what you have to charge to your patients for not losing money, but making money. So you see, it works at both sides. It can tell patients where to go, what to expect, but it can also tell centers, very commercial centers probably, what they can charge patients and what is then, in fact, what patients can expect for what they pay for. So I hope I made clear that at every level in our setting, and I think that IVF is a sort of setting that is really prone for introduction of artificial intelligence, that artificial intelligence is coming in sometimes in a rather fancy way rather than in a, let's say, more efficient and a situation where it's really needed. But I'm sure that because it's so error prone, because it's so labor intensive, only for these 2 reasons in the coming years, I'm sure that in many labs worldwide, there will be systems in place where artificial intelligence will make our life easier, will make this process more accurate and quality-wise maybe even better. So My feeling is that artificial intelligence is not really a threat, but it's rather a tool that will help us our patients, and it will be for the benefit of everybody. So that is my last slide. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and then I will stop sharing so that if needed, we can have preguntas.